So we have Sam Ayton-Hill from Moreton in Marsh. Hello, Sam. And she is working with a neighbourhood plan group, and we've got Robert Adams there working with Stroud Community Housing Project and Wayfarers, and I know Robert's particularly interested in self-build. Thomas Miller, who's an architect at Miller Howard, based in Chalford, and he's again interested very much in self-build groups. We've got Marilyn Miles here from Cirencester Co-Housing. Hello, Marilyn. And they're looking at how to engage those who are looking for affordable housing. Excellent. We've got Chrissy Castle from Upton St Leonard's Parish Council. I think we probably met a few months ago, just before lockdown. Hello, Chrissy. And they're looking at the problem of elderly people not having places to downsize. Peter Minty, Chairman of Stow-on-the-Wold CLT. Peter, are you in France today?
No, I'm in Stow-on-the-Wold.
Oh, wow. Yeah, still sunny in Stow. So we've got Rob State from Cirencester Co-Housing. Hello, Rob. And they want to learn how the hub might be able to help them in achieving attracting affordable housing. John Bloxham, Stroud Town Councillor. Hello, John. Working the CLT scheme in Oxford. Okay. And Vice Chair of Two Rivers Housing. Wonderful. So we've got Carl Ranscombe as well, who's from Nailsworth Community Land Trust, who of course have had an excellent scheme on a garage site in Nailsworth. Lucas Shoemaker from Stroud Wayfarers, particularly interested in planning opportunities and establishing co-housing. Excellent. I think that is a lot of you done. Let me just see if they make sure that there's nobody else waiting to join. I think that's everybody in, isn't it? Well, thank you for that. That was a quick way of doing introductions rather than everybody trying to go through person by person. So hopefully that you found that useful, and it gave you a bit of a taste of who we've got on the call here. So I'm going to share my screen now so that you can see the presentation. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So, on to our first agendaed item. What is GlosHub and how can we help? To start with, I'm going to talk a little bit about community-led housing in general and what is community-led housing. A lot of you will already know an awful lot of this, but a few people here are possibly newer to looking at community-led housing in general. So community-led housing is about local people playing a leading and lasting role in solving housing problems by creating affordable homes and strong communities in a way that's difficult to achieve through mainstream housing. This includes self-help housing, tenant management organisations, community land trusts, co-housing, group self-build and custom build, and mutual home ownership. We have a really strong history and enthusiasm in Gloucestershire for developing projects like these. And some of the categories here highlighted in red are just examples of some of the people and the projects that we've got represented here on the call. I probably missed some out, so I'm very sorry if I had, but I know certainly we've got a number of community land trusts and self-help housing and co-housing groups here and self-build. So, you know, we do have a really good enthusiasm in the area for developing these kinds of, which is excellent. So a community project has open and meaningful community participation, ownership and management or stewardship by a community group or community organisation. And at the end of the day, it results in houses that benefit either the local geographical community or an intentional community and these benefits could be protected in perpetuity. A community-led project isn't a project that just has some extra consultation with the community, which sometimes some communities might feel tokenistic. It's also not a housing association or a developer-led scheme that has the support of the parish council. And I want to sort of caveat that by saying that a housing association or a developer can absolutely be involved in a scheme and can initiate a scheme. But I think that the most important phrases and words to sort of pull out of the community-led housing is section there is participation and management, ownership and benefit to the community. And I think that there's a place for all types of schemes. And I think a housing association or a developer-led scheme with the backing of the parish council is the route that a lot of parishes go down, and it's another route that GRCC can support with. But it's not strictly community-led, and we'll be talking more about community-led housing today. So benefits. I might be preaching to the choir a little bit now, but here are just a few of the benefits of a community-led approach. So first of all, community ownership. So long-term investment through ownership of local assets in perpetuity and the investment of surpluses back into the community. Community ownership, so also affordable housing, delivery of affordable houses for local people to meet housing needs and developed in a way that benefits local community. Being very unstrict there with the term housing needs. So you could have a need for affordable housing, you could have a need for social housing or indeed market housing. So that, there's a place for all tenures within that definition. Community support for regeneration and engagement in the planning process. So activating local public support for new homes and regeneration, and keeping people engaged and sort of giving people some influence about the area that they live in. Increasing housing supply and unlocking smaller rural exception sites. So two of the sort of prominent examples of community land trusts in the Stroud area, you've got Nailsworth and Eastington. Eastington used a rural exception site, and Nailsworth Community Land Trust used a smaller garage site that possibly wouldn't have been used by any other kind of project. Long-term sustainable communities, promoting community cohesion and accountability and a sense of connection, leading to a long-term sustainability of community. And lastly, increased likelihood of innovation and environmentally friendly builds. So housing developments done through a community-led approach tend to be innovative and built to high environmentally sustainable standards. Communities may be more likely to get involved with a community housing project because they have a drive for ensuring more environmentally friendly builds, or possibly builds that encourage good mental health or physical health, or ones that specifically match the aesthetic of the surrounding area. So if you live in the Cotswolds and particularly want a scheme that uses the Cotswolds stone and really fits in your area, then a community-led approach may be one that's really appropriate. So pathways to community-led housing, and Max Comfort will go into an awful lot more detail about this later on, but there are three general ways of sort of getting involved to start with if you're a community member. First being becoming a community champion. So a community member informed possibly by a parish housing needs survey, may be the best place to know what will have the most impact on solving their local housing problems. And a grassroots community project is incredibly powerful, but also incredibly challenging and will require dedication and perseverance. Somebody used the term the other day with me, you need to be time rich. And certainly I think that it's something that does take a lot of time, and you need a really good, strong group behind you. So joining an existing community-led group or organisation. We've spoken already about some of the CLTs in the Stroud area, and really if you were in a parish that was neighbouring one of those CLTs, or living in that area in particular, then they would be the first point of call if you were interested in getting involved in one of these types of projects. And lastly, a developer community partnership, and we've spoken a little bit about this on one of the last slides, but a developer such as local authority, landowner, a housing association or a builder can access support from a housing enabler, so me or one of my colleagues, to bring forward community members to engage in robust community engagement. The community must then lead on the project with the support of the development partner for it to be truly a community-led scheme. So now we've got a sort of basis in what is community-led housing. If we move on to what is Community Homes GlosHub, which is what you're all here hopefully to find out. Have I gone back? So what is Community Homes GlosHub? GlosHub is hosted by GRCC and works with communities across the county to help bring forward community-led housing projects, creating affordable homes and strong communities. And we achieve this by providing advice and support to enable communities to navigate the process of delivering a housing project from start to finish, and then ongoing support with occupation and management of the properties. So GlosHub is funded by Community-Led Homes and Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. I think another thing to mention is that hubs are popping up all over the country now. I think there's only two or three counties that don't have a community-led housing hub, which means we're part of a very large network that are all supporting each other and working together to make sure that we've got maximum coverage and are able to share best practice and support as many groups throughout the country. So what support can GlosHub provide? We aim to provide support and guidance for all types of community-led housing through each stage of the project. So we would start with initial decision making and scoping. We can support with group development and governance and business planning. We can support with communications, site identification. Some of you may have attended a training session that I ran just before lockdown on site identification. So upskilling of your group and doing training sessions like that is one way that we would be achieving this. Advice on land negotiation support, planning support, looking at build options, planning regulations, and eventually, the living support and housing management and membership management. And we'll also be providing a one-stop online information centre, which is in development at the moment and very exciting and very fun to work on and develop, which will provide case studies and all sorts of resources. And we'll also be running events like this and training and pairing people and projects together for peer support, which I've done a little bit of this week, and hopefully will have a really big impact on some of those groups that are just starting out, where they can speak to some other groups that are a little bit further along the line. So this list isn't by any means exhaustive, and again, Max will be going into a little bit more information on this later on this afternoon. But that's just a taste of the support that we can provide groups and how we would support you going forward. So costs. Unfortunately, there is a cost to this support, which enables GlosHub to be sustainable and hopefully around for project 2 and 3 and going into the future, and able to support communities in this way for years to come. So I want to be very clear that we're not, that we are not for profit. So all the money goes back into supporting the communities. So projects are charged £3,000 per unit, so that's per house that's built or renovated, for the support that is received. This charge will be staged and will begin once the funding is awarded, and there is a fair certainty of build. And as you can see on the screen there, the stages are planning permission granted and start on site. So really important that the projects will recoup this charge in applications for project funding. So there is no cash cost to the community group or their development partner. And if you don't receive funding or you don't reach these milestones, then we don't expect the project to pay out. So we are very clear that, you know, there's no cash cost to people, unless possibly you're looking at a different funding model, and then we can have that conversation with you. The stage charges also ensure that GlosHub has a real vested interest in supporting you to ensure that your project is properly funded and is successful in reaching those milestones and obtaining planning permission, and hopefully resulting in the homes that your communities need. So there are some circumstances where you may opt to commission other services from GRCC, such as a housing needs survey or a mail out, and those are GRCC projects and separate from GlosHub, but there are options there, and we can be talking to your groups about the best ways to do that as well. So to sum up, this is the process that GlosHub will take you through. We'll provide you with some initial advice and some support, which some of you have already been in touch with me about. We will then ask you to complete a scoping questionnaire, which my colleague Martin, who's in the office with me today, will be talking to you about later on. And then we will meet with your project group to look at your vision and discuss the support you need, and discuss what does success look like? What does this project look like when it's completed? And we will include this information in a memorandum of understanding for both parties to sign, and that's the project group and the hub, so that we have a clear understanding of what we're working towards together and what the milestones are. We will then appoint an advisor who will be best placed to complete this work with you. And from this point, we will provide you with the advice that has previously been agreed upon and support you towards a successful project. To give you a little bit more information on these steps and the process of developing a project, I'm now going to pass you over to Max Comfort to talk about the steps of developing a community-led housing scheme. Max, do you want me to continue sharing the screen, or would you prefer for me to stop? Oh, you're muted at the moment. Oh,
got it.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Got you.
Probably no slides at the moment. They will be available, obviously, afterwards.
Yeah, I'll send them out to everybody afterwards, but I'll stop sharing my screen for now so that Max can talk.
Thank you. Great. Hello, everybody. And just a little bit about me. My background's in architecture, master planning, quite a long time ago. That sort of morphed into business planning and business advice. And then I got to meet something called co-housing and got hooked. And that was some time ago. And I suppose I was involved from about 1995, which is a long time ago. Got involved in the Spring Hill co-housing in Stroud, which some of you may have heard of, and sort of co-created that with David Michael and two others. And at the moment, I'm project managing a co-housing initiative in Sussex for older people, and also getting involved in one for people with multiple disadvantage in East London. Co-housing is a very, I discover, a very benign concept model which can be adjusted to all sorts of needs. So that's my background. First of all, when you look at your slides later, you'll see we divide this up into 4 bits. And the first one is group. So first of all, you need to ask yourselves a lot of questions. Who are we? And what are our backgrounds? What do we actually want to do? What do we need? What sort of housing do we want? What size? Do we have families, for example? And then what do people know about community-led housing? It's important that as many people as possible display what they know, but also what they don't know. because that can be quickly provided. Any thoughts on a model we have to ask ourselves? Do we have a sense of, well, actually, we'd rather do a housing co-op, or we might want to do a mutual home ownership model or a co-housing? And why? Why are we thinking in terms of these models? What's the link between our needs, our aspirations, and these models? Because really, the model is just the methodology. Your needs come first. And then you need to make some decisions. Who's in the group? Who's actually going to be part of this group? How are we going to debate and make decisions? Are we going to do decisions by majority or by consensus? Has anybody, you can use your little, what's it called, reaction thing here. Has anybody used the yellow, green and red cards consensus method? No? Well, oh, someone has. Very good. So, yeah, how are you going to make decisions? The trouble with consensus, it can take an awful long time. I remember a meeting we had at Spring Hill Co-housing, an hour and a half to discuss the colour of the bloody lawnmower. I mean, goodness gracious. Anyway, much easier with majority sometimes, but consensus tends to involve everybody. Is there going to be a membership fee? I mean, who's going to pay for the biscuits and the hall hire? Yeah. You need to appoint officers. They're called chair, secretary, treasurer, and you need to decide how these roles are going to work. Is the chair going to rotate? Not literally, but are they going to be? Is it going to be a new chair every 6 months, every month, every meeting, or not? And who is going to be the resource investigator? If we're quoting Myers-Briggs, who's going to be doing the research, finding out about stuff? So all these things you need to decide. Obviously, we want to go do some visits. Where are we going to visit and why? How do the places that we've decided we want to visit tie in with the model that we think best suits our needs? And who's going to organize those visits? I spent a very long weekend in Denmark many years ago looking at 8 co-housing sites. And thank goodness one of the people living out there organized our visit for us. But it was amazing and really worth doing. Would it be good to invite people to come and talk to us about their experience of setting up cooperative housing or mutual home ownership or whatever? Then the other decision you need to make, of course, is how often the group is going to meet. What are people's natural rhythms? Is it going to be every fortnight, as we did in London when we tried to set up a co-housing project there? Is it going to be monthly? Are the meetings going to have themes? And are you really up for doing this? It's always good to put in the odd reality check. Do we really want to do this? It all seems very complicated, and believe me, it is. But are you up for that? That's a really important decision to take. And then starting to prepare for a funding application to pay GlosHub and others. And you'll notice when you get the notes that at this point, the writing changes from blue to red. And red is when GlosHub starts getting involved and supporting you. So the second thing you need to decide is the site. Well, first of all, you need to start making friends. You need to make friends with planners, estate agents, local architects, and so on. What do they know about sites? What's going on? Now, Robert, who's with us somewhere, hello, Robert, has been doing some site searches for us, for wayfarers. And there is an amazing amount of information out there, but it needs someone to sift through it. Now, you get to ask the questions now. How do we find a site? You ask GlosHub. Chloe already mentioned there was a training recently for that. How can you help us in finding a site? You ask the local council, local estate agents again. And they're a bit difficult at the moment because they're under pressure, but they can be very helpful. And then you need to agree exactly what you're looking for to put on your site. How many homes do you need? I mean, is it some 2 beds, 5 beds? Is there going to be the odd 15 bed? Perhaps not. But, you need to get an idea of who is going to be living there and what their needs are and how that translates into unit type and size. Then you can start writing a detailed specification to give to people who are going to be advising you So you're making it very clear what it is you need, what you're expecting them to provide for you. But also talking to local architects, beware. Don't ask them to do anything until it's clearly agreed that it's going to be free. I speak with experience. And I was in architecture, so I'm allowed to say that. So if you're going to ask architects to do stuff, make sure that it's fully understand that so far it's pro bono. Then if you're still mad enough to want to do it, form an entity. A community benefit society, for example, a community land trust, a community interest company. There are lots to choose from, and you want the best fit. Okay? So the third thing is to plan. Now, you will need a business plan. I know that most people don't like business plans because they consider them to be dry, fat documents full of pie charts and figures. It doesn't have to be that way at all. I've written literally hundreds of business plans and read thousands. But a good business plan is simple, well prepared, but simple. And it does have to include a number of key things. First of all, who we are. What are our skills and experience? What is it that we want to do in detail? What is our proposal? Then who is supporting us? You know, who else have we got on the team? GlosHub, Pro Bono Architect, etc. Then, now you know what in detail what's going to be done and how it's going to be done, you work out what it's going to cost. The development, getting a planning approval. I've just recently done a planning approval for a fairly large co-housing project, and the planning fees and all the other bits and pieces and associated reports and BAT surveys and NEWTs surveys, it all came to about £120,000. So, you know, you need to work out how that money is going to be acquired, and there are grants certainly to help you with that. So yes, where's the money coming from? And then something called a Gantt chart. I hope you're familiar with that. It's basically a timetable which realistically sets out how long this is going to take. Gantt charts are wonderful because they are indeed a very effective reality check. And you'll be surprised when you start thinking, oh, we're going to do one of these, we need something there, or we haven't done that. How suddenly the months fill with activities and how you need to shunt some of those activities down into the next month. So Gantt chart is essential. And then some of you may not want to do this, but I strongly advise it, a cash flow forecast. The cash flow forecast proves that your project is viable. So that basically is the outline of a simple business plan. So then we get on to sites. How are you going to acquire the site? Are you going to, I've lost you, hang on. Someone's either going to get an option for it, hopefully, or, where are we? Let's go back to that, sorry. Either free, which can be done, I know Lucas has done that amazingly, or you might have to pay for an option. And then you have to be very clear what it is you're getting an option for. What are the circumstances of the person selling you that option? Are they desperate to sell? Has the site been available for a long time? Is there a lot of competition for it? All of those things need to be taken into account. It could be through the local council, as Chloe already mentioned. The council pretty much gave to Nailsworth CLT a site, an ex-garage site. Or, if you can acquire the cash, you can buy a site. Thirdly, you'll need to firm up on the group and get commitments from the members. One of the most important things about the group is getting commitment, because it's very easy to drift in and out of a group and not really make a commitment. I've seen it so many times. And I would say probably with a group, 80% of the people are very happy to talk about whatever it is they're doing, co-housing, mutual home ownership, etc. And 20% are actually going to do it. So revise your specification. You've got more information now, and make it as crystal clear as possible, because now you're going to be appointing professionals to make your planning, pre-app negotiations, and hopefully your full planning application, which, as I said, can be quite complicated. And then you need to get advice on the development and build phases for your project from people who actually respect you. The reason I say this is because with Spring Hill Co-housing, for example, it was innovative, it was new for its time, and various people were very skeptical about it. But one of our professional advisors didn't think we should be doing it. He thought we were stupid and mad, and therefore it affected his attitude. And although he came from a highly respectable professional organization, and this wasn't the architect, by the way, and that was Archetype, and they did a very good job. Although he came from this organization, his cost analyses, etc., were sometimes late, sometimes had inaccuracy in them, and basically his attitude towards us, his emotional view of us, affected his performance. So it's really important when you're dealing with professionals to get their emotional buy-in, because that will affect their performance. Right, who's going to project manage this for you? Are you going to get a paid professional project manager? Sometimes a quantity surveyor will do that for you. Or will you do it yourselves? I strongly suggest you get a paid professional. And then, goodness gracious, you move on to site. Very exciting. And you start the build. But of course, who's going to be building this? Are you going to do it yourself? If so, are you going to be building all of it yourself? Or are you going to do some of it? Are you going to perhaps have the shells built for you and you'll kit them out yourselves? Put the electrics in, the plumbing and so on, the kitchens and the fittings? Or will you have a contractor do the whole thing for you? Now, if you're having a contractor doing the whole thing for you, you need to have a contract with that contractor, with that builder. So what sort of contract are you going to have? This is where you need to get advice. There are lots of different contracts. There's a partnership contract, for example, where, to put it simply, you agree early on which contractor you want to work with, and you work with them in the detailed design phase. And they bring all their expertise of the local conditions and construction techniques to bear on that detailed design process. That can be very useful. And it's agreed usually that at the end of that period, you agree a price. If the price comes in below, if the cost rather comes in below that price, then you share the gain with the contractor. If it goes 5% over, you share the pain with the contractor. If it goes more than 5% over, the contractor pays the rest. So you get a certain degree of cost certainty, and believe you me, that is really important. And avoid the, I have an uncle, he does building sometimes. Very tempting perhaps, but you need a proper contract. So, do you have the project management expertise to run the contract when it's on site? It can get really complicated. So if you don't, who's going to do it for you? Again, as I said, a QS might do that, cost consultant. We talked about what sort of contract to have. Yes, and then in your group, who's going to be managing the money? Who's going to make sure the contractor gets paid on time, that there are no causes for the contractor to claim a delay, which means the whole thing's going to cost more. You know, you need to be very sharp about that. Now, meanwhile, if you're still talking to each other, start working out how you're going to manage when you're actually in your homes. Who's going to do what? If it's a co-housing project, there's all the common parts, the common house, kitchens to clean, windows to be cleaned, the parking area to be de-weeded, toilets to be cleaned, all those things. Who's going to do that? Are you going to employ people to do that for you, which means your monthly service charge will be higher? Or are you going to do it yourself? Are you going to form groups to do that? How's it going to work once you've moved in? That's basically the question you need to ask. And once you've done all that, have a damn good party. So good luck. And do consult GlosHub. They know what they're talking about. Any questions?
Doesn't look like there's any questions coming up, but we will have a question answer session at the end of today. So I'm really, really looking forward to all of the parties we're going to be invited to when you've all got houses built. That's very exciting. So just another quick call. Any questions for Max, or should we keep them to the end? I think we're good. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Max. That was really helpful. Next agenda item, I believe, is to hear from Martin, my colleague here, about scoping, the scoping questionnaire. So what I'm going to do is share my screen again so that he's got his presentation up. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, Martin, it's just a down arrow there. So just that arrow there to move along.
Right, good afternoon. My name is Martin Hutchings. I'm a colleague of Chloe's. My job title is Rural Housing Enabler with GRCC, which means that for the past 10 or 11 years, I've been very much involved with working with local communities, often parish councils, and looking at identifying local housing needs within the parish, and then going on to deliver affordable housing, often through rural exception sites, but not always, sometimes on allocated sites. So that's sort of a brief explanation of what I do at GRCC, and my role here really is to help with the GlosHub delivery. Now, previous to working with GRCC, I've worked at local authorities in development work and housing strategy. So I have direct experience really with dealing with acquiring sites, with planning applications, and through project management with delivery of affordable housing. So the question arises, oops, hurry up, let's go. What's the purpose of a scoping questionnaire? Why has the GlosHub chosen to use a scoping questionnaire? Well, we do so because we're looking at gathering information, and that will enable us to respond to the community group by providing sound advice and sound support. We need to know, the more we know and understand about the group's aims and ambitions, the better that we can respond. The hub itself has advisors with a very wide range of skills and experience. As some of you are members of our steering, our group, and that includes in community housing, affordable housing, and residential development generally, and includes projects. I've got a note here of projects mostly in Stroud, interestingly, or Stroud District, I should say. So who do we ask to fill in the questionnaire? The questionnaire actually will be available online, but we can make it available obviously in paper form. So who can fill in the questionnaire? Well, to be honest with you, anybody at all who's interested in talking to us about community housing. We are regularly undertake parish housing needs surveys across all 4 rural local authorities, and we're increasingly working with Gloucester City and Cheltenham Borough as well. But when we undertake these housing needs surveys, we also publicise the Gloucestershire Hub's work and community housing. So we're hoping that through our day-to-day work, if you like, with housing needs, that will actually attract more interest from community groups. So who benefits? Well, I guess I would argue that there's obviously the group itself, but I would say the whole community benefits. It's a bit like when I look at affordable housing projects. You know, we might provide half a dozen houses in a small village. Well, those houses are there, you know, forever, and they're there for the benefit of people with a connection with that community. So I would say that, you know, I'd like to think that in perpetuity, for the benefit of all. So what happens to your submitted questionnaire? Well, it will come into Chloe and I. We'll review it, and one of us will come back to you, and we'll want to set up a meeting, really to find out more information about what your aspirations are and what stage you're at. And who can I contact? Well, I've already said that. It's Chloe and me are the main points of contact at GRCC. Right, your group. We need, as I said before, the more information we know about you, the more able we are to help you. So we are interested to know how many members in the group, how long have you been active for? Hopefully not too long at this stage before we can actively assist you. Do any of your members identify with being part of a minority group? That's quite important to us, as we are particularly interested in helping minority groups. And is your group legally constituted? And we've listed on the presentation there a number of means of being a group could be constituted, and we're here really to give advice and the options available to what you feel may best suit your needs. And if your group does have a constitution that outlines how the project will be governed, that's important to look ahead to the future. We've already spoken, or a lot's been said about sites and site searching. Again, I'd like to think from the experience that I've had with delivering affordable housing in rural Gloucestershire, that we're very experienced with identifying and securing sites, particularly in the smaller market towns and the villages, and as I said, particularly in regards to rural exception sites. I would say again that in response to what's been said already, it is probably the single most challenging part of a project. Comes close second, I would say, to planning. But without a site, you obviously going nowhere. So what's important to us is whereabouts in Gloucestershire is your project based? That's to establish the local authority. We have a good rapport at GRCC with the planners and with the housing teams at the local authorities. We have very good contact with them, and we've maintained that for many years now. So that I see as a great asset, and one that you really need to use, and we would welcome that. So local authority you're working with, have you identified a specific geographical area for your project? Well, obviously, you know, we need to know whereabouts you're looking. Is it a specific village, or is it over, you know, across a wider area? What steps have you taken so far to finding a site? There are lots of ways now to look for a site. I often use local knowledge. If we're working with the parish council, parish councillors will often know the local landowners and who's might be interested and who might not be. We use local newsletters to advertise and invite landowners to come and talk to us. And also we make it very clear from the start as regards land values and planning uses. I think one thing that's important with the landowner is we need to be upfront with them from a very early stage. If they have high expectations of land value and, if you like, open market housing on their site, they need to tell us, and we need to tell them what the consequences are in terms of the land value and whether a project is likely to be viable or not. And how do you plan to acquire legal title on the land or buildings? That's another way, I think, of asking, do you plan to buy the freehold, leasehold? How long's the lease? What's the restrictions on the lease? What's the restrictions maybe on the freehold? Are there any covenants, etc., etc.? All these issues, what affects land value is frequently, is planning, use, and restrictions on the use of the land. And sometimes restrictions aren't a bad thing because it brings back down the land value, but it can also, can be managed with the project you're trying to deliver. So the two can combine. Have you identified land or buildings for your project? Well, sometimes these projects are site-led. Sometimes they're, it's an idea and there's no site and no thoughts of a site at the beginning of the project. I think, to be fair, every project is different. So it doesn't matter where you're coming from. The important thing is that you have a desire to deliver. And has planning permission been granted on your site? Well, yeah, absolute key. And from my experience, it's very rare that a housing association or developer would look to secure a site certainly for affordable housing without, it would normally be conditional on the grant of planning consent, particularly rural exception sites, because a rural exception site by definition is a site that normally wouldn't get planning permission. So it's a very risky business buying a green field without that consent. How do you intend to fund the project? Well, I think that was mentioned in the last session. Absolute key, funding, and really that should be discussed from the very beginning, and the various stages of types of funding needed for the various stages of the project, from the very early stages through to actual development cost project itself. And have you discussed the aims of the project with your local authority? Well, as I said before, that hopefully, if you don't have contact with your local authority, we will, and we will certainly, we can assist with giving you contacts, or coming through us, we can make direct contact with those local authority officers. I say local authority officers, again, from experience, involving or engaging with the councillors, the district councillors or borough councillors, that's also very useful, because quite frequently it's the councillors that actually make the decisions in respect of planning, and that being planning committee. And if you, it's like most people, I think, if you engage with councillors, and they have an understanding of where you're coming from and the aims of your project, whatever the planning rules and policies are, if there's an understanding, they'll have an empathy, and that that can gain their support. And I feel that that's quite important. So what happens next? Once Chloe and I have had the opportunity to assess your position from your response, one of us or more could be will join your group and help create your vision. I guess it's a running process. It's something which will happen over a period of time, but we're here to help and advise and provide you with options. The group have the opportunity to discuss the various legal positions that are available, and again, you will choose the most appropriate that you feel meets your aims, and essentially GlosHub, we're here for the duration of the project. In fact, we're here all the way through to completion and handover of the completed dwellings, but also, I think, which is probably certainly as important, if not more so, is the continuation of the project. And once it's occupied, after all, it might take 10 years to provide, but those properties will be there for our lifetime. And I think that's probably the most important part of it. So I'm going to hand back to Chloe, and thank you very much for listening.
Right. Hello again. That was excellent, and two really interesting points that I picked out from listening to that. The one was about diversity and equality and diversity within housing projects, and it's not something that I've got a slide about or was planning to speak about, but there is some research being commissioned by community-led homes into diversity in the housing sector in general, and I think that it's a really important point, and I would encourage all groups to have a think about equality and diversity, and if it's appropriate to have an equality and diversity procedure and protocol, because we are underrepresenting as a group of professionals. So important point there. And the last point as well that I think is really important that Martin brought up is that the houses that you're developing are going to outlive us. Hopefully are going to outlive us, and that's a legacy that we're leaving, and it's important to make sure that we're looking to the future and ensuring that we're contributing to our communities in a really valuable and important way. So thank you very much for that, Martin. That was excellent. So moving on, what's our next item? So that's me talking about the Community Housing Fund. So the Community Housing Fund was designed to increase the housing supply in England by increasing the number of additional homes delivered by the community housing sector. It was to provide housing that is affordable, local income levels, and remains so in perpetuity, and that's a really key word there, in perpetuity. And deliver a lasting legacy that for the community housing sector in the form of effective and financially self-sustaining body of expertise. The Community Housing Fund was not extended in the last budget by the government. The main message from the Treasury was that they are sceptical of the value for money that community-led housing offers. To demonstrate the economic and social benefits that make it worthwhile to invest in community-led housing, community-led homes have developed a two-stage campaign. The first stage is to gather robust evidence on the value for money and to use the government's own methodologies to analyse this and submit it for the comprehensive spend review. If you've completed recently a survey from community-led homes, then you've fed into this research, and thank you so much for doing that. I know that the deadline was quite a tight turnaround to get that survey back, and it's really important. So thank you very much for doing this. They're also researching how community-led housing can contribute to the economic recovery post-COVID by capitalising on the amazing community response that's been happening throughout the country. So stage 2 of the campaign starts at the end of August, and this is where the projects and community members can really show their support. Community-led homes are going to publish their value for money report and their research as evidence, but there are two main things that the projects and the groups and community members can do to show their support and show how vital this fund is. So the first one would be to write to your MPs and express how important the fund is, and how important it is for your communities and for your projects. So community-led homes, I think, are going to write an example letter to give groups an idea of sort of the points to hit. But if I don't see anything like that, then I'll be getting in touch with each group and supporting this to happen if it's something that you want to do. The second thing is to just keep the conversation going. So if you are speaking to the press, if you're speaking to your local authority, if you're posting on social media, then just keep that conversation going and talk about how beneficial this fund is in providing the homes that your communities need. And I want to just finish off this very, very short segment by saying, although this is incredibly important and we really, really want this fund to continue, and it's a great help to all of the projects, I don't want to end this by making people feel disheartened. There are most certainly other funding options out there, and as a hub, we can support you to look at those options and to access funds in other ways, whether it's through community shares, through another fund or a loan scheme. There are most definitely other options there, or the Affordable Housing Fund also through the government. It's just that this was a really valuable tool that we would really like to see. It'd be very beneficial for it to be reinstated. So I am going to jump off my soapbox now, and we have, I think we're pretty much bang on time for about a quarter of an hour, 10 to 15 minutes. To use for questions and answers. So if you have a question for Martin, Max or myself, please put your hands up with the virtual thing, or if you don't want to do that, just put your hands up and make yourself known. And we will get to you as we see you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Any questions for the three of us that have been speaking? Marilyn.
I did put one up on the chat, which you may be able to answer at some other time, because I don't think I quite worked out what community-led, whatever it was. I did look it up.
Okay. I can see your question. I think you've got, that's a really good point, and I want to be really clear about this. So I will, I'll separate this out now. So Homes England and MHCLG are government bodies. Community-led homes is a separate body that have developed these resources and have been supporting the hub programme, which is how we're funded. There are also a number of other partners in that, so National CLT Network, Groundworks have been the administrators for the grant programme, so they are separate from the government. Ted, you've got a question. Oh, sorry, Marilyn, was there anything else you wanted to say?
Yes, there was. How does the Cotswold District Council Enabler service fit in with what GlosHub does? Because at the moment we're looking for a site in Cirencester, and I know there's Lois and Rebecca. And you know, it's how you two organisations are fitting together or not.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I work really closely with Lois and Rebecca, and we're communicating constantly on this. And I think that we've got quite a clear protocol of how we're going to sort of differentiate of who does what roles, if that makes sense. So I think the answer is that you can work with both of us, and we'll take slightly different roles, but that will be a meeting that we will have combined with each group that has that question. So Forest of Dean, also Lois and Rebecca work in the Forest of Dean. So groups in the Forest of Dean and Cotswolds, we will have meetings with each group with the Cotswolds and Forest of Dean enablers and the hub to make sure that we're not doubling up on work and stepping on each other's toes. But we're meeting and talking constantly and communicating about the projects and the steps that they need to take. So Ted has put a question there in the chat that says, when will the website go live? I don't have a fixed date yet, but I'll be sending around a link when it does go live. It's currently in development and it's looking brill. So I'll keep everybody informed of that. Did I just see Rob put his hand up?
Yes, one of the things in Siren Coho that we've given some thought to, but we haven't got anywhere with it, is trying to improve on the diversity of our membership. And I didn't know whether there's any strategies that you have available that perhaps are available to groups that looking to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we can talk to you about. I think definitely developing a equality and diversity policy is key, and also doing wider marketing and making sure that that your community is really well informed in what you're trying to achieve, to make sure that you're reaching everybody. But that's absolutely something that we can support with.
Thanks.
Milo?
Hi there. You showed a really interesting slide. One of the first slides you showed was the benefits of community-led housing. I'd love to see a kind of a qualified version of that, with kind of where those kind of ideas or where the research has come to sort of to back up some of those kind of initial thoughts. Not just the convincing planners and so on and groups, but to convince the stakeholders, landowners as one, and planners who kind of and planning committee members who ultimately are the gatekeepers. But from my perspective, convincing landowners that this is an appropriate way to go forward. Is that something you will be working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really key point. I've just realised that I'm answering all these questions. Martin or Max, has anybody else got it?
Yeah, just when it comes to sort of enticing members and landowners and getting them interested, there's no better way than to show them other examples, preferably local, to actually demonstrate what can be done. Because the message, Chloe and I can sell the message, but it's always best for people to hear direct from the residents or the experiences of that particular community. We've done this on occasion when we've invited parish councillors on trips around Gloucestershire to look at various affordable housing projects we've completed, and it really, it gives them a sense that actually we can achieve this, because someone has it. Might be Ewley, might be Cambridge, might be, it could be. There's lots of examples where we've shown off, and often these projects, the local people who've got involved with them are very willing to actually, if you like, show off what they've achieved, and they're also keen to see the other communities benefit from what they see they have. So. Yeah, I think that's what we probably can think about doing. Absolutely.
I think that sort of two-pronged approach, where it comes from the grassroots community groups as well as from the hub, is vital. We will also be running more mini launches like this is to different stakeholder groups. So this is the first with the community. And then we're going to be looking at doing meetings with landowners and things like that. So that's another thing that we're looking at doing.
Yeah, talking about examples, if I can just have a couple of minutes, an affordable rural exception site has just been finished, completed and occupied in North Cerney. For those of you that know North Cerney, it's on the same side of the main road as the church. It's very close to the church. It's a really fantastic looking project. It's 12 affordable homes. 2 of them are for affordable home ownership, shared ownership, and the remainders are all for rent. And the support we had, it's not a community project as such, it's not community owned, but the support we had from Northleach was absolutely astounding. We had support from the parish council, from lots of residents. The site was, as it happens, arose through recommendation from residents, and we actually had a landowner, fortunately, who was willing to release the site at at a price that was viable. It's an expensive scheme because it's in the Cotswolds, and it's in a very pretty Cotswolds village, because it's the stonework and the real slate tiles on the roof and all the Cotswold characteristics that the planners and the conservation officer demanded makes it expensive. But it's a very fine looking scheme, and it's a scheme which I'd like to very much encourage North Surney to sort of promote and let others see, because that scheme had we started in 2013, had a very fast start, but it got held up in the planning process rather than the land ownership. But it's fortunately it's come to a successful conclusion.
So we've got a question there, another one from Ted, saying, is the HUB planning to lobby GLOS MPs? So we've written to MPs previously, and we will be doing so again. I want to make it clear that GRCC and GlosHub are apolitical. We don't get involved in party politics, but when it comes to the tools that we need to do our job, then absolutely we're talking to our MPs all the time about that. And yeah, we need to get people behind this initiative, absolutely agree. Robert, did I see your hands go up?
Yes, you did. Is there anything that the hub can help us to get more rapid assessments of sites that we may identify? So, we may find a field on the edge of a village or something like this, but it seems to be taking a long time to get some preliminary assessment as to whether that's even potentially viable.
Yeah, I understand that this is an issue, and I'll let Martin speak on it in a second if he wants to. But one thing that has happened recently for me and Ted from Horizons is that we've been looking at a site and trying to communicate with Stroud District Council to get their feedback on that site, just their initial thoughts. And due to the new way of working that we're all sort of talking about, it's difficult to contact people. But we're getting around that at the moment by putting in a pre-app. So not looking at just that site, but that might be a really viable way around doing this is doing a pre-app, a pre-application assessment, that is. So that's definitely something that we can support with. Martin, is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, pre-apps are the sort of official way of normally paying for advice from the local authority planning officer, or I say advice, it's asking for the planning officer's interpretation of the local plan. I mean, traditionally, I've always made informal requests through the officers, the contacts I have at the local authority, and sometimes, from my experience, we'll get a response within days, which is amazing, and sometimes it's months and months and months, and that's unfortunately not, it varies across the local authorities, but that's one of the things that unfortunately arises through an informal sort of arrangement. I think with a pre-application, it's much more thorough, and normally local authorities won't charge if the application is regarding affordable housing. So, there is an advantage there. But personally, I prefer to go through the informal approach first, and because it's I've good contacts at all four rural local authorities, and we would hope to get, bearing in mind we're trying to deliver what the local authority have aspirations with as well. We like to think that they make their contribution, but it can be slow and it can be very frustrating.
And I certainly hope that this sort of picks up again as things get back to normal and gets a little bit easier to achieve.
Yes, we're trying to develop a short list of sites but getting responses as to viability of any particular site seems to be particularly slow at the moment.
So that's Stroud, isn't it, Robert?
Yes, that's Stroud.
Right.
Yeah, we can just keep trying to get an answer out. There's no sort of I suppose we've got a quick route in just because we know the offices that we need to talk to, and we can do that matchmaking. But as you've identified, it does just take time.
It can do.
Yeah. It can do, yeah. I mean, there have been other times where there's been a really quick turnaround, and I think it does depend on the environment that we're all working in and when we ask. So will GlosHub assist or advise landowners on how to access housing infrastructure funds? Excellent question. Something that I did want to bring up that was in my notes and that I haven't said, that if we don't know the answer to something, we will always go away and look it up and find out the answer to that thing and get back to you. But my instinct reaction to that question, I don't know about you, Martin or Max, but I would say that if that landowner is looking specifically at developing a community-led approach, then I don't see why not.
Yeah, I mean, with affordable housing has access to Section 106 funding from the local authority. I'll go back to North Cerney Housing Association project, but they receive grant, Section 106 grant from CDC. So, yeah.
I asked the question just because I understand it's such a complicated process to apply for. Sometimes some landowners have just opted to go for private finance in the end because it's such a minefield to apply for. I'm also thinking in the context of potentially where a landowner might be looking to partially allocate some of their land over to a affordable housing or community-led housing project, but also kind of cover themselves by enabling some for profit, some open market housing. And that's where those applications get quite complex. But enabling some market housing might unlock some affordable. So they might have very good intentions, but not be able to unlock it until they can release funds, one to pay for the other, if you see what I mean. I think it's landowners need that advice.
I think it's interesting. I work with Milo, and we actually have a kind of a potential site in Stroud that we're trying to persuade the landowner to go down a community-led housing route, and something like a kind of infrastructure fund would really help tip the balance in that direction. So it's quite feels very relevant at the moment.
Yeah, I think you've got to remember that whether it's infrastructure fund or Section 106 funding, it's grant funding. It's not loans, it's grants. So that's important. I think that going back to, you mentioned market housing and a landowner trying to take advantage of part of the site, if you like. The planning, the local authority are very careful about giving grant funding for affordable housing, and then with a landowner who's looking to take advantage with market housing on another part of the site. A landowner effectively can't take grant funding for the affordable and then increase his profits on the market housing. The two don't mix.
Yeah. This site that we've got in mind would be purely for community-led housing. So,
okay. Well, we need to look, as Chloe said earlier, I think, at what the infrastructure fund can provide, because traditionally it's Section 106 funding that goes towards affordable housing, and that's a completely separate pot.
Yeah, I can just see situations where a landowner might would only make their land available if they knew that they would get some of the market return.
Well, just at one point, we've mentioned rural exception sites. Rural exception sites are primarily driven by affordable, but you can place market housing on rural exception sites as well. It's a rarity, and the market housing is normally a smaller proportion than the affordable, but it can be provided. So it's I'll give an example actually. In Stroud, in Coley, there's a development. I can't remember exactly how many houses. I think it's about 23. Well, a majority are affordable, but there are some market houses, and they're quite substantial houses and quite apparent. But that's a rural exception site. I think it's nearing completion now.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is completed now. I think it completed at the end of last year. But yeah.
Would the infrastructure fund sort of put in a proportion of the infrastructure cost if there was market or self-build plots available on a site? Is it sort of pro-rated, or is it, because I'm thinking that self-builders are prepared to pay more for their land, so they're cross-subsidising potentially other aspects of the affordable housing by coming in on a site, and would the infrastructure cost, which is generally expensive, be pro-rated amongst the housing units, or some other method?
We need to find out.
Yeah,
Well,
I
can
think.
I add something here? So we're looking at a model where we have 3 market value houses cross-subsidising 6 to 10 affordable houses. And that is getting reasonable support from CDC.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to answer this, the best thing that I can do is go and do some research on it, because it's not something that the Housing Infrastructure Fund isn't something that I've been massively involved in before. So I will go and do some research on it and get back to you, Robert and Milo and Thomas, and let you know.
I'll just very briefly, just on the Housing Infrastructure Fund, it might be worth speaking to Ian on this, because we've, as the NCL, we've been in discussions with Homes England about unlocking some infrastructure funding on a site. So there is appetite there from Homes England, and my understanding is that they do it on the number of homes being delivered rather than necessarily a multiple of the value. So, but yeah, Chloe, it might be worth reaching out to Ian on that, because he's been leading on that and has a contact at Homes England who's been discussing this with. So
Brilliant.
That was a scheme which was wholly affordable. So there was no cross-subsidising going on. So there is appetite there from Homes England.
Thank you for that. I'll get in touch with Ian. Okay, questions? Any more questions? Oh, it looks like we might be done for the afternoon then. Tomorrow I will be getting in touch with, oh sorry, Charles. We have got a question from Charles. Oh, you're muted, Charles.
Yeah, I didn't introduce myself to start with. I'm Charles Coates. I'm chair of the Gloucestershire Rural Community Council. I'm also chair of the GlosHub steering group. And really, just before everyone signed off, I wanted to thank Max and Martin, particularly for their presentations, and most particularly Chloe for organising this. I've really just sort of sat in to see how it goes. It seems to me there's been a lot of interesting dialogue and questions. So certainly I think we've launched in some degree of style. So I really wish this venture every success.
Thank you very much, Charles. That's
Charles.
Really, yeah. And I do hope that this afternoon has been helpful. And the next thing that I'll be going off to do is sending you the scoping survey that Martin was talking about, along with some resources on the steps that your group will need to take, and a feedback form as well. So please do stay in touch with me and complete that scoping questionnaire, and we'll start supporting you. Marilyn, you've got your hand up.
Sorry to go back to this Cotswold District Council enabler. Would you still want a group like us, which is primarily based in Cirencester, to complete this questionnaire?
Absolutely, and I think once you've completed the questionnaire, if that's what you want to do, we will arrange a meeting with, I think Lois is working particularly with Cirencester as far as I'm aware, so we'll arrange a meeting with the group and Lois and myself to discuss roles.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yes, we have had one meeting with Lois and Rebecca, but I just don't want to tread on anybody's toes or do the wrong thing.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and we'll work that out as a team. We're all working to the same end, aren't we? We all want to see these houses built. So I think that concentrating on the goal and getting there together. Brilliant. Well, I think we have pretty much finished right on target. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for allowing me to record as well. I'll be sending out the recording to people that weren't able to join us or that had to leave partway through. If you do have any problems with being on that recording, then let me know and we'll make sure that we cut you out. And thank you, Marilyn. Thank you for thanking everybody. Right, lovely to see you all.
Thank you, Chloe.
And thank you to Martin and Max for all your